So thank you all for coming and staying. Once again, I'm Jonetta Rose Barris, curator of today's event. Bernard Dimchuk is a co-curator. He's in the back. And we are very happy that you are here. I wanted to tell a story before we get started with our next speaker. I met Ethelbert Miller when I was pregnant with my daughter. And I had just arrived. Well, I hadn't been in DC very long. I didn't know anything about what was going on, but everybody says, if Ethelbert's there, it's a poetry event, Ethelbert's there, it's worth you going. So I did. And I've been friends with this man ever since, okay? And he has been my mentor. He was my mentor back there. I was just a little 20-something girl thinking I could write poetry, coming from, you know, and he helped me. And at one point, I was the assistant director of Ascension Poetry Reading Series, which was a series that he started. If there's anyone who actually has touched the lives of almost untold number of African American writers and writers of color through, in this city, in this country, and in the world, it's Ethelbert Miller. I mean, I don't know anyone he doesn't know. Or I haven't he's read everyone. He can tell you about different periods in time. And so he is the perfect person for this event and to do what we've asked him to do. I will tell you that Ethelbert, when I decided and asked Esther Productions about this project, I said, we need to do this. But the person I went to first was Ethelbert Miller. What do you think about this? The next person I went to, Joy Jones. I've known her almost as long as I've known Ethelbert, and they've both been advisors and guides to me as I've made my way, growing as a writer, growing as a woman. And by the way, this is Black History, this is Women's History Month. I would say Black History, Black women history. The reason we kind of did this together, y'all, I'm digressing for a moment, just a moment, okay? The reason we decided to do this was because a lot of the writers that we're celebrating are women writers, or women. And so it's wonderful that we could be this bridge, or do this event could be that bridge between Black history and women's history. So celebrate yourselves, women who are in here, and celebrate yourselves as African Americans as well, and Americans in general. So Ethelbert knew when I decided I wanted to do this, I said, I want to do this, and here are the writers I want to do, and do you know where Sharon Bell Mathis is? And he says, oh my God, I haven't spoken to Sharon in a long time. I said, well, we have to find Sharon. Where is Sharon? And I started, you know, well, what the hell is Google for, right? So I did Google, and I was Google. I mean, and then I started asking everybody that I thought might know, and no one knew. And so, okay, so I'm a journalist. When I get on a story, I actually don't convince myself that it's not a story until I've gone the full length, okay? So what did I do? I called my friend Ken Cummins, former loose lips of City Paper, who is, okay? Now, Ken Cummins is also a private investigator. Yes, that's what I did. I put a private investigator on her. Go find her and go find Maxine Clare. They were two writers that I wanted to have at this event. So Ken was having some kind of issues, and I was riding him every other week Did you find her? Did you find her? Do you know where she is? So finally he said, Janetta, I found her. I got the address, I got the phone number, I got it all for her and Maxine. And Maxine was on Massachusetts Avenue. Unfortunately, Maxine wasn't in good health, so we couldn't have her here today. But she's a lovely person, and I'm sorry she couldn't be. But I wrote a letter and had it hand-delivered to Maxine and to Sharon's home. Sharon thought it was a scam. She called me, she said, Jeanette, you know I thought this was a scam. And I said, but I have to thank Ken Cummins. He's not here today, but wherever he is, I am eternally grateful because he found her in our own community. It wasn't like she was in somewhere in Maryland. The woman was right there in Southwest, in the Bellevue neighborhood, not far from where she had worked as a librarian. And I was like, why are you hiding undercover? What's wrong? Why are you undercover? Well, we getting ready to raise the cover. So that's what we have done today. And I'd like to introduce you to my two friends, Ethelbert Miller and Sharon Bell Mathis, in conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's nice to be here. This is an honor to be next to Sharon Bell Mathis. And she told me a little earlier, the last time we saw each other. And it was in
New York.
It's New York, this is in Brooklyn, Sunday, very early in the morning. And a car goes by and stops in the middle of the street. And this woman jumps out and she says, June Jordan and Ethelbert Miller. And June turned to me and said, we are busted.
It was surprising, but they're just so beautiful. She was, and he still is. And this is an awesome time for me, and I'm trying to keep myself together because this man is someone I have admired for so long. I mean, really, he's awesome. Anything you know about him is 3 or 4 times that much. Because he's wonderful. He knows everyone. He believes in you. And sometimes you don't believe in yourself until somebody comes along and says something. And you realize, okay.
Okay.
So this is an honor, really it is. But be kind.
Okay. Well, I told you what I wanted to ask you first.
Yes.
You graduated from Morgan State University. You got your library science degree from Catholic University, but you also became a teacher with special ed.
Yes.
And I'm looking at the library science degree, I'm looking at teaching at special ed.
Yes.
How did those things shape you as a children's writer?
I have to tell you a story first. When I was very young, I think I was in maybe the 2nd grade at PS 90 in Brooklyn, New York. And the teacher asked me to go to the board and do a math problem. Now, I'm 2nd grade. I was terrified. I knew I couldn't do it, and she knew I couldn't do it. But she sent me to the board, and I waited there. It was so embarrassing. The kids were laughing. I don't know if I cried or not. But what she said to me was, go back to your seat. You're so dense. I didn't know what the word dense meant. But when I went home and told my mother, it was not good. I'll never forget that day. And when I started teaching, in the beginning when I taught at Holy Redeemer, I've got students here that I taught in the 5th grade. Raise your hand. Okay. Yes. Yes. And it was a 5th grade of marvelous children. They didn't have any issues. They could do everything I asked them to do. We had fun. They liked the B's and so forth. They liked geography B's, and I love fractions. We just had a good time. But that was an ordinary class. When I started in the DC public schools, I went into special ed because I wanted to be with children like the child I used to be. And I taught math, very basic, very elementary. And I loved those kids. And I never wanted them to feel that they were not important. I never wanted them to feel that the world knew more than they did. And I taught in special ed for years until the Judge Skelly Wright decision occurred. Julius Hobson had a son in special ed. And in the special ed classes, you know, you were assessed, you were in. You didn't get out. They followed you all the way through high school. Our A's were listed as an A, but they had SP next to it. So that let people know, you know, that these children did very well in what they had to do. But Judge Skelly Wright, when approached by the Hobson Rule, decided to break up the special ed system. So the children I could keep with me all day now had to go to other classes. And they had to go with packets. They had to go without us, without the teachers. Here they are in classes where the children were being children, and you know how they behaved, and it was terrible. And I decided I wasn't going to send my children into these classes. So I kept them. And then one morning, the district big deals came in and said, Sharon, you can't do this. You can't do it. All right. At that time, I decided I'm going to go back to school and be a librarian because I can't watch children in a class where they couldn't really succeed because the teacher had her children. And then she had these special children who needed more than the average child. They just needed more. Beautiful human beings. But I know what it feels like when people think you're not enough. I've been there. I've been there. And so you didn't ask for all of this, but I wanted you to know how important it is for me to include children across the spectrum. The first book I ever sold was a reader. Academic Challenges had us write, and then they would change it into these very, very easy sentences. I loved it. I was proud of it. The children could read it. They could. My first 2 books were like that. But then I won an award, Council on Interracial Books for Children, and that opened up my world as a writer. And so I was now with traditional publishers. And whatever you wrote, that's what it would be on paper. That was it. So I probably lost a sense of what.
No, I'll ask you the second question. You know,
It's being 87. I turned 87 a few days ago, so
okay.
allow me a few things.
No, you're doing wonderful.
Okay.
You know, I was looking at the late 60s, early 70s, a number of women writers who might have been writing poetry or novels. They decided to write children's books.
Yes.
And it seems they began to write children's books for their children because they didn't see the books in the stores or they didn't see the books in the
They
library.
didn't exist.
You've dedicated Red Dog, Blue Fly to your grandson, nephew, to the Oxon Hill Boys and Girls Club. It seemed as if you were writing children's books for your family.
I was. When I wrote Red Dog, Blue Fly, there was not a book about boys in this, what is it called now? Ankle biters football. You ever hear that? Where they're very young and they're, 5 years old, and you put the helmet on them and they are so proud. Oh, the muddier they get, oh gosh, the better. And I said to my grandson, I said, I do not like your coach because he's fussing and he's saying things and I don't like it. He said, no, he has to talk to us like that because if he doesn't, we won't listen. I said, yes, you will. He said, no, we won't. So I had to back off when I heard him yelling at these children. The parents were there. We were all there. It's like, why are we allowing this? The children loved it because they were loved by that coach. They knew it, so it didn't matter how he said or what he said. He was on their side, and they knew it, of course. But yes, I try to keep in mind the children who are closest to me because they were in classrooms, but there were the other children, and I cared. Eloise Greenfield and I still miss her so much. When we traveled, we had a job to do. I took all of the books that had the most racist comments, the worst books where the child was walking on the sofa with a trumpet. I mean, black families would never, okay. But, and I did that. I had to go back, I did the research, and people were like, oh, there was so much discomfort in the room because many of these books were still in existence. Now we talk about Dr. Seuss. That didn't come up then because he was the greatest thing in the world at that time. And people didn't realize the little things that are being said that you don't pay attention to unless it strikes you, unless somebody says, you're so dense. You know what I mean? And then Eloise, nobody could do it like she could, with her soft voice. She would come after me on the same program and talk about the beautiful children's books that were there. She would read parts the way I would read parts. But when I read, they were cringing, and that's what we wanted to be, to let them know, this is what's going on. But with Eloise, we were clapping, we were laughing, we were happy. So that's the way we did it at that time, because it was needed. Now, it's not needed as much, because I think the editors, certainly the writers are coming forward, who just will not have anything ridiculous on a piece of paper. Absolutely not. And I was so happy to hear the keynote speaker, because Sidney Clifton was a little girl when her mother and I traveled together. Now, she was awesome. I mean, she could take 5 words and shock the whole room. That's how beautiful she could be in her words. That she just, I mean, it was a wonderful life, and I enjoyed it, and I got a chance to meet the E. Ethelbert Millers of the world, and they were so accommodating and so helpful. But I remember when. And for those of you who, nobody in here is my age, I know. If it is, I don't believe it. But if you are, you absolutely know what was there. And I can look at a teacher over here who is still a friend of mine. She's 90 years old. The greatest science teacher you could ever have for junior high school kids. And she took them to Lawton on a Scared Straight program. And one day, because I was a librarian, she said, Sharon, do you want to go? Because you want to go with it? I said, yes, I'll go. Well, on the bus back, the children were crying because it was I was a teenage, and it was all, the way it was done, the prisoners would approach the children, and the children didn't know that it was scripted. And so you have these, they went in, they were all, please, I am the last word in a teenager. And then these men would come forward. It was something. I cried, the kids cried. They were different for a few days, weren't they, Hayes? They were different for a few days, yeah. And then they went back to being the wonderful people they were. One thing on Monday, and Thursday they were something else. And also in this room are 4 people that I taught, as I told you. And they're here with me. And that is so marvelous. I hope I wasn't mean. But it was I first started teaching, so anyway.
Okay.
I'm on for kids.
No, that's all right. I'm here to help you out.
Okay.
Talk about the process of working with illustrators. Do you write with pictures in mind, or do you have people select the illustrators for you? And I know you did books with the Dillons, Leo and Diane Dillon, with the 100 Penny Box.
Yes.
Talk about working with illustrators.
Every illustrator I ever had for my books were black illustrators. The Dillons were an interracial couple, beautiful couple. We've lost him now. And so I didn't have to explain anything. I didn't have to go through what you went through, Doctor, because they were black illustrators. They knew who they were. They knew what to do. And the 100 Penny Box was up for both the Newbery and the Caldecott, meaning it was up for the art and up for the text. It got the Silver Award. It was an honor book. The Newbery honor book was for the 100 Penny Box. But I didn't fuss about it. I didn't say, what had to be. It's just that the respect they had for me presupposed that they would give, if I wrote this story for black children, then the illustrators would have to be the same. We didn't have to discuss that. I never had a problem. And if you look at the pictures that are in my books, just the pictures, beautiful. I mean, sometimes better than the words. I'm being honest with you. But they just took, they gave it a different thing. They expanded my words, And now there's some, I have to say, and Kichi is in this audience, and I cannot not. Just wave your hand. This black lawyer who is working on reparations, she is so well known and so respected. But when I met her, she was a teenager. And we had a DC Black Writers Workshop. She was there. The world is wonderful, isn't it? It's so full of magic. So full of magic. So I never had to fuss. They just did it.
They did. Well, you've been examining family issues that might be considered dark, such as drugs, domestic violence, also writing about grief and illness. Talk about that challenge.
Well, when I wrote Teacup Full of Roses, it was completely academic. What I knew about drugs, my brother, who is a retired New York detective, told me some things, took me around. It was foreign to me. He even said, I don't like that gun because you're glamorizing that gun in Teacup Full of Roses, and I don't want you to do it. I said, I want a gun that's going to kill right away, no chance of this child surviving. And my brother looked at me as only a little brother could do. He said, don't do it. You'll be sorry. Don't name that gun. Let it do what you want, but don't give it a name. My editors had accepted it. But you know, you learn to listen to people who love you. You do. So I didn't name the gun. Did not. And it still had the same effect because I had to listen. It was a horrible story. But it was academic. Do you know drugs finally touched my family? Do you hear me? It was no longer academic. It was not something on a page. And, but you know, as families, you get through it. Whatever, you get through it. You wonder why. What did I do? That was Teacup Full of Roses. I couldn't write it today. I could not write it today. It would be an entirely different story.
Talk about we're talking about children's literature, but let's break that down in terms of children's literature and young adult literature. Even before I know it, there's a scratch and sniff stage, even before children's literature. How challenging is it today when you talk about social media, where young people are introduced to certain ideas? How do we make sure that a book that is for a child is not really for a young adult?
You have to depend on the parents, on family, teachers, librarians, people who care about children. Let them have a say. They have something to say. Because the writer is going to lay the words out. We're going to make the path. But the reception is in the hands of others. Because sometimes we are wrong. And it takes reviewers to do what they do. They're not always wrong. They're not always wrong.
Let me ask you this. I'm looking at how I'm reading books to my grandchildren. There are certain books, children's books, that are helping a child learn how to read.
Yes.
To the point that you can start reading it to the child, but then that child I can read it myself.
Yes.
How difficult is it in terms of having the story, but also teaching the kid ideas and also concepts in terms of, morality, things of that
Read
sort?
to them.
Right.
Read books to them they may not be ready for. You do it in your voice. As a librarian, for Judith Viorst's book, Alexander is a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. You only had to have the refrain twice. The third time you said it, all of the kids would be. The work is done. The art is there. The art is there. If you read to your children, and I know you do, provide books. Sometimes the book may be more than they're ready for. Trust yourself. Trust the child. And if you are uncomfortable, you can go to the school board. Sidewalk story was a woman, a black woman in Prince George's County, said Sidewalk story was the worst story she ever in her life ever saw. And she tried to ban it in the schools. Well, when someone called me, first thing I'm going, I'm crying. I'm like, oh my God, what on earth? Kids are evicted every day. What's wrong? They need to feel that I can get through it. This is hurtful. Guess who I had on my side? Tom Feelings, the great artist. Well, the next thing you know, it was a big deal. And the book wasn't banned. It was never, they told me, considered banned. But here's a story of a little girl who has a good friend, and her family's being evicted. And the pillows that they're piling up on the street are pillows that they took, their overnight, their toys. And here's this big pile. So she's a little girl, and she decides, as soon as my mother and father go to sleep, I know what I'm going to do. And she went and started covering that pile of clothes and belongings. And of course, she was little. So by the time she climbed up to the top, she was tired. And she put her little head down and went to sleep. And then flashbulbs, reporters, all of that. And the only thing Lily Etta was thinking, because she had pierced ears, and she had straws in her ears, and her mother had said, if you're good, if you don't do anything horrible in the world, if you're the best kid in the world, you're going to get gold earrings. So when she woke up to the cameras and the media, she said, oh, I'm not going to get my earrings. She ended up getting earrings from people all over the city because I'm like that. I wanted to do that. She had the last picture in that book. She has one earring from somebody in this year and another one in that year. So there are choices
Right.
we have to make, and we have to remember that the children are the best of us.
Well, you made a choice. You produced back in 2004 a children's book dealing with Ray Charles.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, in terms of identifying individuals who are worthy of biography,
Yes.
that there's a message in their life.
Everybody knew, all the grown-ups knew about Ray Charles. I wanted the children to know, because when I started doing research, and I saw what he had gone through as a youngster, I wanted to present it. I was upset, I'm going to tell you, when I saw the movie Ray Charles, because in this movie, Ray Charles' brother drowned in the midst of his community. How are people moving around and you don't see a child drown? How do you know? Ray Charles' little brother died. He drowned in a big metal
So,
tub in his own kitchen. He was playing with his brother, and it was fun until it wasn't. So Hollywood does what, and I love Hollywood, don't get me
you
wrong.
love Jimmy Foxx.
Whoa. What he did was almost, and you know the beauty of it? Ray Charles lived to see him do it. And he said, go on, boy. That was it for me. I was happy. I was happy.
How do, and this is a big challenge for many people in the audience who are writers, how do you introduce not simply the idea of race in a children's book, but racism?
Well, you don't introduce racism. You introduce a child that other children can identify with, and it goes from there. You don't have to hit them over the head with any. You create a child that you love. It exists. They only exist here. And your editors and the people. You don't have to do it. You don't have to bang them over the heads. Now, with Little Black Sambo, that's a different story. That's a different story. With Black Mambo and Black Jumbo and all of that, okay. But if you create a character that the children care about, they'll fight for that character. They'll become. You know, you don't have to. I don't do it. But there are writers who do that very well. They can write a book and teach racism. I write a book and teach humanity. I want these to be ordinary children that we love, because these are our children. They're not fantasies, they're real.
When we're talking about our community here, we're dealing with a time of censorship. Are there any tips or things that you would suggest to people here in terms of how does the community organize against books that are being censored?
Read the books very carefully. Read everything you give your children very carefully. Because some things are so, what's the word? Give me some words, somebody. They're so hidden, yet subtle. Thank you. Ooh, thank God there's a person in the room who knows words. They're so subtle, and you don't see it. You really don't. As a matter of fact, as an adult, you can read a book for adults, and there are little messages that are in there, you know, and it makes you uncomfortable, or it makes you very happy, depending on what you believe in. But the world is filled with people, and people are human, and they're going to make errors, and they're going to make mistakes, and they're going to learn, and they're going to create, and they're going to design and discover. And that's the beauty of it. We have to know and look out if something is wrong. You know, if you come into your house, you left your house all day, locked up and everything. If something is amiss, you know as soon as you open the door, don't you? Something, now wait a minute, that light wasn't on, that chair was not there. There's something about the human psyche that you can pick up things. You may not do it right away. You may not be able to do it when you want to. But believe in the human brain. You will do it. I once saw on TV where no matter how smart you are or how long you live, you are only going to use 33% of your brain. 33%. If you live to be 1,000, and you're an Einstein, that is extraordinary. This organ is, you can do anything.
Talking about your brain, and this is about to be my last question, are there any unpublished material that you have that you said, okay, I wish I had have completed this? Or were there children's stories that you wanted to write but never got around the time to write?
Okay, I wrote a manuscript. It has been with my agent over 6 months. That has never, ever, 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 ever happened to me. And it has to do with DC, and it's for not the teenagers, but for the 8 or 9-year-olds. I love it, but every day I look in the email or I go to my mailbox with hope. Nothing yet. So I don't know if they'll publish it. I don't know. I've given it my best. I've given it my best. And no news is good news. That's what my mother used to tell me.
Well, let's hear from the news from the audience. I guess they got some good news. Any questions for Sharon Bell?
Now, you know I made a lot of mistakes up here. Just tell me. It's okay. I can take it. 2 years ago, no. But now, I can take it. I'm just lucky to be alive. 87. Woo!
Just turn it on. Press the button. Just till it's green.
Hello, I did. How about that? So you got me by 10 years.
Oh, okay. We'll switch ages.
No, that can't happen. One of the things, I don't know why this popped up as you were talking, because I don't know that it's directly connected with what you're saying, but I'm thinking about how you refer to different books that affected you, and I realized that I still read, even today, books I read as a child, like Alice in Wonderland, like those kinds of books. And I've noticed that the more and more I read them, not particularly that one, but other texts, that there seems to be, I almost feel like there's a shudder in my head when it gets to the racist parts and the, that I put that on in order to be able to appreciate what I'm reading, almost like I want to go back to that childhood innocence, and that I'll read a passage that says something negative. I think the Doolittle stories were like that. If you remember, they had some horrendous pictures of black people in Africa. And I remember as a 6 or 7-year-old wondering, gee, I wonder what people in Africa think about that. And then now it's like, chills. And I'm wondering, do you do that? Do you know what I mean? About put on a blinder or put on something to read something old that you can't, that says something negative. Do you ever have that?
Well, I think as a human being, we may miss something on a Monday, but we won't miss it on a Tuesday. We won't miss it.
Yeah, that's funny. You're reminding me that particular line. I was reading Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov this week, and somewhere in there it says that God said that each day was good, but Dostoevsky hadn't read it because Monday was the one day where God said it didn't say it was good. And so it's interesting. Monday, yeah. But thank you. So you say you read it and then you pass on. Basically, you just hold it for a little while and not keep it.
You can only handle so much. You can only handle so much, all of us. And whatever you can handle, whatever you can deal with, because you might not be able to do so tomorrow.
Okay.
Do what you can when you can, while you can, and be thankful you can.
Keisha, you had a question?
Okay.
You had a question.
Oh, I remember she was a teenager and smart as a whip.
thank you.
I'm not as...
You don't know how much of an impact you had on me as a teenager with the DC Black Writers Workshop. Ethelbert, you at Howard University. I mean, I sat at the feet of the best. Sterling Brown, Hakeem Madabuti, Paul Coates. I mean, I'm just saying, Eloise Greenfield. And I want to tell you, Eloise once said, see, back in those days when I was writing, then I kind of stopped and went on to become a lawyer. Yeah. But one of the things Eloise said, and I just want to hear what you have to say, you see, I came up a little bit behind you all. And I came up in the Black Power and the angry mode and all. And she said, well, Nikisha, you're preachy. Okay, so I mean, and I was preachy. I was talking about Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey, and I mean, all of you know, in my works, because that was my particular era.
And it still is.
And it still is, because I'm reparation. But I guess what I'm asking is, and I mentioned you in my, you say I donated 10 books in the introduction to my book, Shining Legacy, about famous Black heroes and heroines. I think I mentioned Sidewalk Stories. I'm not quite sure right now. But I guess what the question I'm asking is, how can we impart to children, to Black children, naturally, which is, I think, what you're saying that you do very greatly, but you have that sense of urgency that you want them to know about the Black heroes and heroines. And so I know I came off very preachy, which is why I independently published and didn't dare to try to seek any mainstream publisher, because I knew that it wouldn't go anywhere. So that's kind of what I'm asking.
In Kichi, you just have to love. If you love people and children, you'll do what you have to do. And you will do it in the best way you can. Because when I met you, you were smart. I mean, I'm not at all surprised that you are a renowned attorney. I'm not. Because when you were a teenager, the questioning and the writing and just your posture, your grace, you had. So you just love and you wait. You love and you wait. And one day, there's a group, and I'll say, wow, that's impeach. You know, believe in yourself first. Believe in yourself. And if you have to use the hammer, use the hammer. But make sure you soften it when it needs to be softened, because you will get more. What is it they say, from sugar than? Yeah. Yes.
Well, talk.
Yes. But you're wonderful, and just continue to be, because our hope lies in young people like you. You go forward. Take anybody to court you want to, because they're gonna lose. Take care.
You know, there was a brief mention of the word honey, and I wanted to get your comment on Eloise Greenfield, Honey I Love.
Ooh. First of all, we just missed her. She's someplace watching, I know. And Lucille Clifton, someplace. These are people whose legacies will never end. Will never end. Years and years, hundreds of years from now. Honey, I Love, what she say? I wrote a poem. She lost everything, but she wrote a poem. She said, still got it, still got that poem. Yeah, yeah. That was Eloise. She was my friend, and I missed her.
Another question, and this guy's in with Carolina. The naming of characters in children's books, how important is that?
Well, you remember that the child.
Now, I'll give you an example. You know, I use some poems in which, and I go into the schools, and I have some characters that have Muslim names. And because of the changing demographics, you know, afterward the kids say, well, that's my name. My name's Omar. My name's, you know, that it seems that if I'm reading a book and that child's name is mentioned in it, they connect with it better.
Yeah.
So now I'm looking at the author selecting names to have that impact.
Now, for me, selecting names is something. I have the people in my mind. They're not named initially, but somewhere along the way, I'm just going to say this, I hope it doesn't offend anybody, but I think God just says, yeah, make that name so-and-so. And Lilietta happens. I didn't know a Lilietta, but when the name came, oh, you know, you have to just trust your mind, trust your art. Believe in what you're doing at any age. Because everybody in here has the ability to write a book today, if you haven't written one, today. Because you have everything you need inside. Everything. Your imagination has been in existence since you were born. Since you were born. And what you can do, you just don't know yet because you haven't tried it. You haven't tried it. You don't know what you're capable of. And as a human being, you're capable of everything, great things. Great things every day. You may get up 5 days a week in just an ordinary day, and the 6th day you say, you know what? I got a song in my head. I'm just going to sing it and sing it till I figure it out. You know, the imagination, what you can do, it's just so amazing. And I remember at Friendship, there were 2 little boys in kindergarten. And the teacher came to me and said, Sharon, can they come up to the library? She said, because they can read. I said, okay. And I thought, you know, fine. Well, here comes these 2 little gentlemen. Hayes can tell you. I said, welcome to the library. Can we stay all day? I said, no, you can't. You cannot stay all day. Can we read whatever we want? Now, I'm telling you, kindergarten. And I don't have the vocabulary they had at that time. Trust me. Trust me on that. You just have to take my word for it. I said, read what you want. Well, now, Friendship was pre-kindergarten through grade 9 until they took the 9th grade out. But for a long time, it was pre-kindergarten to 9. So you have teenagers. There's one librarian, and I'm the librarian. The child came over to me, the one was Charles, I can remember, and he said, can I read this? I said, yes, you want to. The book must have been like that. That boy read it like you would read it. And I said, okay. I sent one of the teenagers down to, because you know it was Thomas, you know, the kindergarten class. You know. When you get a chance, come up. Those boys could read anything on earth, any newspaper. And because, you know, I had a readathon every year, and I made sure my trophies were bigger than the sports trophies. Because Jim Vance came out, they all came out. I said, I want that reading. And they had to read 100 books. And I had a blind child who was doing Braille, but he didn't finish because he was a gadabout, you know. He was it, so he didn't have. To make a long story short, those 2 boys were my MCs, and it was shocking for the parents and the kids and the teenagers who didn't know. They read, it was, I'm thankful because I had never seen anything like that. And the parents didn't want them to go to the first grade. They could have gone, they were to the sixth, really, in terms of the ability to read. But you know what was interesting? The teenagers in the library would go to the kid, read this, read, because they were, read that. And they'd go, no big deal. Man, read this. And so one of the kids said to me one day, Miss Mathis, who taught them to read like that? And here I stepped out on faith. Thank God I didn't lose my job. I said, God did. Nobody else could do it. God did it. I mean, you had to see those little people. Even now, I'm in awe. And I wasn't as bad as the kids saying, read this, read this. But I would just say, well, tell me about that. And not only could they read, they were reading young adult. And the picture books took them 2 seconds. And I said, what do you think? And the vocabulary of these 2 young men, it was extraordinary. It was, the only thing you could do was just, watch in awe. Because here is the human brain showing off, as it is wont to do.
Let's talk about, there was an article in the New York Times recently about marketing. And if you look back over your career, you just talked about having a manuscript that you're waiting to be published. Has things improved? There's a report from Lee and Low about how there's still, I think 73% of the industry is still white. So we're still dealing, some black people drop out of the industry. How difficult is it in terms of looking back from, like, say, the 70s to now? Are we dealing with the same issues? Or is
The
there
issues may be the same. I don't think too much changes. People are people. We just have to continue to create. And we cannot worry about what's going to happen. We have to create it. Get it out. Get it forward. And just hope that what you have to say has some meaning, if not today, tomorrow.
Well, then I'll ask you this question, because when I look at you, there's another side of your career I think is important. I think of you, I think of Marita Golden, I think of John Oliver Killens, people who are saying, okay, writers have to organize. You were very important about that. That was a very important issue to you.
I was very organized, and John Oliver Killens was one of and his wife Grace were 2 of the people who were working with the Council on Interracial Books for Children. They picked Cyborg Story to win. That opened up my whole career. And John Oliver Killens used to say, be the long-distance runner, remember?
Right.
Don't worry about the sprint. Be the long-distance runner. And one day he called me on the phone, and he said, Sharon, I need you to do something. I said, what? And he said, well, I'm going to be away from Howard for at least a year or so. I want you to take my place and teach that creative writing class. And I said, oh, no, I cannot do it. I cannot.
Janetta was in that class, if I'm not mistaken.
I almost had a heart. Really. I prayed. I said, Lord, what am I? Howard? And I'm a Morganite, and you all used to give us we were, Morgan State was what, the stepchild?
You just stay over there.
Okay, I'm serious. Because when you go to Morgan, you just have Howard over your head. And people are like, why aren't you? And my daughter graduated from Howard, so I did something right. But, but I went into that class, and I looked at those young, bright faces, and I said, I'm going to do it the way John said. Have them write critique their own, and you bring it forward. And it was a wonderful experience. You know, they got all A's, you know that. And Howard never said because I was going to bat, because they were wonderful writers and so passionate, and just, it was every night. I hope maybe the bus wouldn't work, or because we didn't have the subways then. I said, let something not work, because I'm not going today. But after several weeks, I couldn't wait. I just couldn't wait to be there with, because it was the first time I was with young adults. And the discussions were wonderful. I mean, once a person read an excerpt from whatever they were writing, sometimes they were long, sometimes short, they knew what to do. I mean, they just brought it all together. I didn't have to do anything but, yes, that's fine. You might want to, you know, clear up a few of those, but that's it. I said, Sharon, stay out. Let them do it.
Any other questions from the audience? Any other questions? I think we're doing, oh, go ahead.
I was wondering if there's ever been a time when you felt that you were on a lonely limb, like if you were the lone voice that was dissenting amongst a lot of people who didn't agree with you, either in a meeting when you were pitching a book or just when you were teaching at any time in your life.
Yes, because when Teacup Full of Roses came out, which is a book with the drug situation, people said, why would you want to write a book like that? I don't want to hear about drugs. I don't want, this is not what I want my children to. Meanwhile, we are losing youngsters because of the drugs, but they didn't want to hear about it at all. Don't do that. And yes, I felt alone. I did, but I knew what I had to do. I had to show Joe, who was my main character, who was going to go through and be everything he had to be. He and his girlfriend were going to live in a teacup full of roses, so now you know that's impossible. But he had a brother who was a gifted brother. I mean, he was smart, brilliant, brilliant. But Joe was every man. He was every man. But his brother was the one who was killed. That was the hardest thing. And people say, oh, I cried. I'm like, yeah, I did too. Because I wasn't sure. I said, maybe he should live, but I don't know. We have to show that drugs will destroy the very best. I mean, it was about his brother. Joe was every person. But his brother was an artist, extremely powerful, who said, people want me to paint something to match their living rooms. You know, so I did my best, but yes, it was lonely, and there were people who today think that it wasn't the thing to do, that it wasn't. So to be honest.
And I think that's a good note to end on, so that we'll stay on time for our conference, for other participation. Sharon Bell Mathis, I want to thank you very much, and I'll give you to your wonderful audience.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Now, I have one, and I don't want this to be a downer. I don't want this to be a downer at all, because I thank you. But the shaking that you see, I have Parkinson's disease. And I'm saying I'm not afraid, but sometimes when I'm at that computer trying to get the story and my hands are doing, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. But I'm not upset. It's something that's happened. I accept it. So just keep in mind, if you see me, you know, and I have a moment, bear with me. I need it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this amazing conversation and for joining us this afternoon. We are so lucky to have you here with us today. I want to introduce Leroy Nesbitt from the Black Student Fund for a special presentation for the Lifetime Achievement Awards for both of you this afternoon.
Running an organization which focuses on K-12 education issues for young people, I try to keep honest about that phrase, children first. So as we take this short break, I just want to acknowledge the young woman, young lady who is here, because we do, at these events, we have children present or people under 18. So I just want to acknowledge you, young lady. You can stand up. You all's work, you all's worry, you all's hope is right there.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we're here today to recognize them. And you know what? My grandmother, who's no longer with us, she used to always say, Leroy, don't wait. Give me my roses now. So we're going to pass out some roses in recognition. And to do that, I'm going to bring in Addison from the board to do our first recognition. Addison?
Thank you. I love this part of the program. I love the giving part, especially to folk who are so deserving. And Sharon, I have to say I am extremely honored to present you a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Thank you.
Lifetime Achievement Award to Sharon Bell Mathis for creating literature that inspires African American children to embrace their history, their culture, and themselves.
Isn't it beautiful? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We do want you to know, we ain't retiring you though. You're not retired. So you keep pressing that button, you keep pressing that pen on the paper, you keep sharing, you keep talking, you keep dreaming, you keep creating, you keep inspiring. We need you. And Ethelbert, I've needed you for most of my life. I told Ethelbert that I used to work at Howard University, and like Nkechi, I'm a lawyer who wish I was doing other things. So, and I used to admire the way that he performed an academic function at the institution at Howard that is unique. And he shepherds this responsibility over decades. And that work is not just teaching students, because he teaches classes and stuff, but it's shepherding this work. The shepherding includes that he's done not only the writing and helping other writers, but documenting what is going on in the Black literary tradition, pushing the conversation forward in public venues, being in the community as an academic and a thinker in ways that make this work accessible to all of us who are not up on the hilltop hill every day, but are still growing and learning as people, and particularly people of color. Ethelbert, I hate to use this word, but I'm not the literary giant that many are in this room, but you're a soldier. Ethelbert, you're a warrior. But most importantly for me, you're on my team. You're on my side. And I want to, on behalf of Esser Productions, on behalf of the community of writers that you've inspired, on behalf on those people sitting here today who love you, we say thank you, and we offer a memorial for your work, your efforts, and you know what else? We ain't retiring you either. You never know who's watching, right? Janetta, you want to come forward?
In the front.
African Americans in Children's Literature, Lifetime Achievement Award to F.E. Ethelbert Miller for empowering through his words and activism Black writers in Washington, D.C. and beyond, and expanding the African American literary canon. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't deal with lightweights around here. We got powerhouse people. Thank you very much, Sharon and Ethelbert. And we are honored to be able to give those to you. And I don't know what to say except that you guys have been great friends to me personally and to the literary community of Washington, D.C., and we are better for it. Thank you. Give us a minute, and we're going to set up for the next panel. Give us 1 minute, all right?